The end is not a stop, but a return. And sometimes the soul begins saying goodbye long before the body follows. Few mysteries disturb the human heart like the slow softening of someone we love. You don't always notice it at first. The change is quiet, almost respectful. A dimming of the eyes, a shift in rhythm. The way time begins to fold around a person's presence. Edgar Cayce often said that the soul speaks long before the body falters, that the body in its final season becomes the instrument through which the soul begins its retreat. Death, he said, is not to be feared. It is merely the soul changing robes. And yet, when the one growing old is someone you love, a mother, a grandfather, a partner, the mystery isn't so serene. It's trembling. It's watching a face you know become a little more distant while the world pretends nothing's changing. Sylvia Browne, a spiritual visionary in her own right, echoed Cayce's truths. She spoke of the final year of life not as a curse, but as a sacred crossing. Not every soul announces its departure with a storm. Many whisper. They leave signs. But these aren't clinical symptoms or bullet points for panic. They're soul signals, gentle footprints in the sand, evidence that the spirit is loosening its grip on matter. And for those who dare to see, not to diagnose, but to understand, these signs become a map. A way to love deeper, listen more carefully, and walk with the one we cherish to the edge of this life with grace. This isn't about knowing when someone will pass. It's about recognizing when the soul begins its quiet preparations. The glimmer in the eyes fades, not from illness, but from return. Like the light from a candle slowly dimming as dawn approaches. They speak of dreams that don't feel like dreams. Of loved ones already gone. Of stories that haven't been told in decades. They eat less not out of rebellion, but because the soul is no longer feeding from this world. Their things precious once are passed on, as if they understand that memory, not matter, is what we truly leave behind. Sylvia said it's simply the soul knows. And sometimes it shows. We are not here to fear these signs. We are here to learn how to witness them. How to sit beside someone whose spirit is crossing borders and love them without trying to pull them back. This channel was created for moments like these. To bring light into rooms where silence has settled. To say what others won't. And to remind you, if something in this touched a memory you didn't know you carried, you're not alone. Subscribe to Edgar Cayce Predictions, not just for content, but for clarity. You don't realize when it starts. Not the moment they grow old, but the moment your soul begins to feel it. The subtle ache, the strange hush in the room, the way time seems to soften around them. As if the air has grown thicker, quieter, waiting for something unspoken. When someone you love is approaching their final chapter, it's not just their body that begins to change. It's yours too. You begin carrying a weight you don't remember picking up. The weight of unspoken things. Of memories returning like ghosts. Of grief that hasn't happened yet, but already lives in your chest like a slow burning ember. And here's the strange part, no one talks about this. Not really. We talk about wills, doctors, appointments. But who prepares you for the moment your father forgets where he left his watch, but remembers a story from 1953 with crystalline clarity? Who warns you that your grandmother might stop eating not because she's ill, but because she's already beginning to release this world? Who tells you that the person sitting in front of you is slowly becoming more spirit than body? Sylvia Browne, like Cayce, knew this. The end doesn't arrive like a cliff, it unfolds like a veil. There's a look in the eyes. It's not confusion. It's distance. The gaze softens as if part of them has already begun to peer into a world you cannot see. People close to the departing often describe this without knowing why she seems here but not. He smiles, but it's different. It's like he's remembering something, or someone. These are not medical symptoms. They're spiritual transitions. The sparkle in the eyes dims not from defeat, but from remembrance. What you're seeing is the slow untangling of soul from skin. Psychologically, this changes everything, because it forces you to confront a paradox. They are still alive, but they are already beginning to leave. You sit beside them, maybe holding their hand, and feel both presence and absence. It is one of the hardest spaces the heart will ever occupy, and it hurts. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of hurt, but the slow, aching kind. the kind that lives in your ribs and whispers at night. You become aware of time in a different way. You watch the way they sleep more, speak less, and how the rhythm of their days shifts into something gentler, more silent. And part of you breaks. You begin grieving before the goodbye ever arrives. Anticipatory grief, a phrase so sterile, so clinical, yet it defines a soul-level ache that has no name. You find yourself replaying old conversations, watching them more closely, wondering, is this the last time we'll sit here like this? Every moment stretches longer and shorter at the same time. And through it all, they change. They sleep more not from depression, but from detachment. The body no longer fights for activity. It begins to surrender, not in defeat, but in peace, like a bird returning to the nest after a long flight. You might worry, try to nudge them back to energy, to meals, to routines, but something in them resists, not with hostility, but with stillness. Their soul has begun to quiet the body. Speech changes too, not just in volume, but in content. They begin to speak of the past, not randomly, but with exquisite clarity. Names, dates, memories you've never heard. They might talk to people who aren't there. They might mention dreams that feel like visitations. You'll hear them say things like, your uncle was here last night, though that uncle passed 20 years ago. If you're not prepared, you might think they're confused. But they're not. They're remembering the soul's version of time, a spiral, not a straight line. They are touching the akashic echoes of their own life, revisiting moments that shaped their soul contract. Sometimes they are already meeting those they'll reunite with beyond the veil. And here's what that does to you. It shatters your illusion of control. You want to help, to fix, to extend. But you begin to realize this is not your journey to shape. You are a witness, a companion, a soul chosen to walk beside them, not carry them, not cure them, but see them through. And that takes everything, because then comes the moment of emotional release. You see them begin to let go of things that once mattered. Objects, heirlooms, tasks. They start saying, I don't need this, or I want you to have this. These aren't practical gestures. They are rituals of release. It's their soul making room for what comes next. Some family members misread this as forgetfulness. But the truth is deeper. It's detachment, sacred, deliberate detachment. The psychological impact is profound. Watching someone release the material world invites you to do the same. It asks you, what are you still clinging to? What haven't you said? What part of you is still pretending this moment won't come? And maybe the hardest shift comes with food. You cook their favorite meal. They barely eat. You offer something light. They smile but decline. The appetite fades not from illness, but because the soul no longer craves the grounding of food. They begin to live on something else, a subtler nourishment. And it breaks your heart. But Sylvia said something powerful. Don't force, don't beg. Listen. The body knows. It speaks softly. And when it says, I am preparing to go, your job is not to interrupt, but to honor. Still, even with all this understanding, the emotional storm within you rises. Because how do you show up every day knowing it may be the last? How do you offer presence, not panic? How do you hold someone with love when all you want is for them to stay? These questions don't come with answers. They come with presence. With choosing again and again to show up, not as the fixer, but as the sacred witness. If this is touching something unspoken inside you, if these words feel like they're not just about someone else, but about you, then breathe. You're not alone. We explore soul truths others fear to say out loud. If you're ready to remember, click subscribe. Your path is just beginning. There's a silence that surrounds the final stages of life, one that no amount of conversation can fill. It is the space between breaths, the pause between touch and goodbye. And within that silence, if we listen closely, ancient truths begin to speak. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who peered into the shadowed corners of the soul, once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he did not say, at least not in those exact words, is this: the end of a lifetime often strips away everything except who you truly are. It is here at the closing of the body's story that the soul's essence begins to shine with unfiltered clarity, not through words or identity, but through presence, through dreams, through silence. Edgar Cayce echoed this mystery in his own way. He said, "The soul is not bound by time or space, but by its own memory." What if that's why at the edge of death memory floods the room, not just the memory of moments, but the memory of self, of purpose, of where we come from? What if those sudden recollections, those vivid visitations from the past aren't hallucinations at all, but the soul remembering its contract? The ancient Greeks spoke of the daemon, a guiding spirit that lived inside every person. Socrates called it his inner voice. Plato said we each forget our divine origin when we enter this life, and that philosophy was the process of remembering. In many ways, death returns us to that same remembering. It peels back the noise of the world and reveals the essence underneath. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, but whole. And wholeness, he believed, comes not from gaining, but from letting go. In our final chapter, the ego softens, the identity dissolves, and we are left with soul. This is not a philosophy of despair. It is a philosophy of return. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and founder of logotherapy, believed that suffering becomes bearable when it has meaning, and that the final moments of a person's life are often filled with an urge to complete something not externally, but internally. A loop, a vow, a reconciliation with the self. He called it the will to meaning, and that is exactly what we witness in those last days. Why else would a person begin to recall long-lost stories, seek forgiveness, or offer their belongings as gifts of closure? Why else would they reach out not to fix, but to connect? Because somewhere inside them, the daemon is guiding again. The soul is preparing for its next chapter, not in fear, but in knowing. Even the Eastern philosophies, so often dismissed by the West, understood this. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, "The soul is neither born, nor does it ever die." He speaks of the body as clothing that the soul wears for a time, then sheds when the time is right. So when your loved one begins to detach from things, from food, from the world, it is not collapse. It is shedding. Not because they are gone, but because they are going home. From Cayce's perspective, death is not an ending. It's a checkpoint, a review, a sacred pause between incarnations. He spoke of the soul's passage through the realms of Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter, not metaphorically, but as literal stages in the afterlife journey. And he often emphasized the importance of preparing not just the body, but the soul for that passage. This changes everything, because suddenly those quiet moments beside the bed aren't empty. They're ceremonial. The hand-holding, the story listening, the silence, they aren't futile. They're ancient. You become the sacred attendant to a rite older than memory. And in this rite, something remarkable happens. Not only does the one who is leaving undergo a transformation, but you do too. You begin to see that life was never about how much we did, but how deeply we were present. That meaning doesn't come from achieving, but from remembering. That the end of a life can be a teaching, a final sacred download from soul to soul. Some say philosophy is for the living. But the truth is, philosophy comes alive in death. It's there in the gentle softening of old regrets, in the whispered I love yous, in the act of sitting with someone and realizing this is what it means to be human. Alan Watts, the British philosopher who bridged East and West, said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. And yet when you watch someone in their last months, you begin to see a person not through definition, but through presence. They are no longer trying to be anything. They simply are. And that is where the beauty lies. The material detachment. That is not decay, it is clarity. The shifts in sleep, speech, and appetite, not pathology, but a rewiring of priority. The way their stories return to the past. Not confusion, but soul orientation. The increase in serenity. It's the quiet calm of someone who has stopped resisting the inevitable and started surrendering to what is real. We spend our lives chasing, building, proving, and yet in the final year the soul does something radical. It dismantles the scaffolding. It returns us to simplicity, to essence. From a Cayce Jungian perspective, the process of dying is also the process of integration. The unconscious rises, the shadows soften, and the self once fragmented by survival begins to reunite. You'll notice this in the way they look at you. not as a role son-daughter partner, but as a soul. They begin to speak in archetypes: the warrior, the healer, the wanderer. They recognize, even if they don't say it outright, that this life was not random, that it had a pattern, that the joys and pains were part of something larger. And you are called to witness that pattern, not to explain it, not to fix it, but to see it. So when you sit beside someone who is fading, not just physically, but spiritually, don't rush to fill the silence. Listen, watch, learn. Because you are not only saying goodbye, you are learning how to remember, how to carry forward what mattered, how to let the wisdom of their departure awaken something ancient in you. And if you let it, it will. You'll begin to ask, what am I still holding that no longer serves me? What conversations have I postponed? What presents have I withheld? And that is where the teachings begin. Edgar Cayce once said, death is only passing through God's other door. And if that's true, then maybe the doorway has always been open. Maybe it's not the soul that forgets its journey, but the living who forget how to witness it. You see, the final year of a person's life is not only a letting go, it's a great remembering. And those of us who are still here, still breathing, still waking each morning to the weight of days we are not left behind. We are chosen to see what the world often turns away from. We are asked to walk a little slower, to listen a little longer, and to remember the soul behind the face we've always known. Because when you witness someone in their final season, something ancient stirs within you. Not fear, not even grief, but recognition. You begin to realize this moment, this ending, is not separate from you. Their journey is the echo of your own. Their stillness becomes your mirror. Their return becomes your reminder. Cayce taught that every soul carries a contract, a sacred blueprint written in the Akashic records before time, before name. And maybe part of that contract is this: to be there for another soul as they fulfill theirs. To sit at the edge of the veil not as a spectator, but as a guardian of presence. So what if you're not here to fix them? What if you're here to feel them? To witness their transition not with dread, but with reverence. To understand that every whispered story, every fading gaze, every quiet goodbye is part of an ancient ceremony, the return of soul to source. When we learn to see the end through the eyes of the soul, something inside us awakens. We begin to understand that the greatest form of healing is not curing the body, but loving the person through their final breath. We become vessels for grace, for memory, for peace. And then we carry them forward, not as absence, but as echo. In the way we speak, the way we pause, the way we suddenly cherish the warmth of morning light, or the sound of an old song drifting from another room. The soul doesn't leave us. It changes shape. It walks with us differently. And if you're here still listening, perhaps this message was meant for you. Perhaps you're not just preparing to say goodbye to someone else. Perhaps you're remembering how sacred life truly is. Perhaps your soul has been nudging you to slow down, to hold a hand longer, to speak the words you've been postponing. What if you're not breaking apart? What if you're simply remembering your soul contract? Sometimes hearing the right words at the right time is how we realign with our soul. If this felt like one of those moments, share it with someone else who's ready to remember. And if something in this touched a memory you didn't know you carried, you're not alone. Subscribe to this channel not just for content, but for clarity. This isn't just a channel, it's a return. Welcome back to what you always knew.